If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us share more amazing stories. Stories that live quietly in people's hearts but rarely find their way into words. Before we begin, pause for just a second. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that the thought of losing them felt like it could break something inside you, this story will stay with you long after it ends. Because this isn't just about motherhood. It isn't just about growing up. And it isn't about romance or drama or anything inappropriate. It's about identity. It's about the silent shift that happens when the person you've built your whole world around begins building a world of their own. And it's about the quiet, painful, beautiful moment when you realize love must change in order to survive. My name is Elise. I'm 44 years old. And for most of my life, I have been two things: a mother, and someone trying very hard to stay strong. My son Lenny is 22 now. But sometimes, when the light hits his face just right, I still see the little boy who used to cling to my coat in crowded stores. The child who hid behind my legs when strangers spoke to him. The boy who would wake up from nightmares and crawl into my bed, whispering, "Mom, stay with me." It was always just the two of us. No partner to split responsibilities. No second income to cushion hard months. No backup when exhaustion swallowed me whole. There were winters when the heating barely worked and I pretended not to feel the cold, so he wouldn't worry. There were nights I stayed up after he fell asleep, staring at unpaid bills and calculating hope like it was a currency. When you raise someone like that, side by side, shoulder to shoulder through every storm, something unusual happens. You don't just become family. You become each other's anchor, each other's witness, each other's entire world. For 22 years, every decision I made had one question behind it. Is this good for Lenny? I didn't date much. I didn't travel. I didn't take risks that could destabilize the ground beneath us. I built a life that was stable, predictable, safe. And in that safety we grew together. But what no one tells you about building a life around one person is how fragile that life becomes when they start to grow beyond it. That it was an ordinary evening. That's the strange thing about life-changing moments. They don't arrive with music or warning signs. They come disguised as routine. Lenny came home late that night. The front door clicked shut, and I heard his footsteps in the hallway. They were slower than usual. He dropped his bag with a soft thud. "You okay?" I called from the kitchen. "Yeah," he answered. But it wasn't a real yeah. It was the kind of yeah that tries to close a door without locking it. I walked out and saw him properly. His shoulders were slumped, not physically tired, but emotionally drained. His eyes weren't focused on anything in particular. They looked distant, foggy. The kind of exhaustion sleep doesn't fix. "Come lie down in my room for a bit," I said gently. "It's warmer in there." We had done that 100 times before. When life felt heavy, when anxiety pressed too hard, when the world seemed louder than it should be. We'd sit in my room and just breathe. It wasn't dependency. It was comfort. But that night, something was different. Not dramatic. Not wrong. Just different. We sat side by side on the edge of the bed. There was silence between us, but not empty silence. It felt crowded. Like unspoken words were standing in the room, waiting for someone brave enough to begin. He stared at his hands. And for the first time in years, I didn't know what my son was feeling. That terrified me more than I expected. People always talk about how hard it is when children are small. The sleepless nights, the tantrums, the financial stress, the constant worry. But they rarely talk about the other hard part. The moment they grow up. The moment you look at them and realize they don't need you the same way anymore. For 22 years, I had been Lenny's safe place. The person who solved the problem. The one who explained the world. The one who knew the answers. But now, he was becoming someone I couldn't protect from everything. And that realization felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Because if he didn't need me the same way, who was I? Motherhood had shaped my entire identity. Every choice. Every sacrifice. Every dream postponed. Without the constant urgency of raising him, there was a strange emptiness forming in the background of my life. And I wasn't sure what to fill it with. That night, Lenny finally looked at me. But it wasn't the look of a child asking for comfort. It wasn't dependence. It wasn't fear. It was confusion. Like he was standing on a narrow bridge between boyhood and manhood, and the wind was strong. I don't know what's wrong with me lately, he said quietly. Those words broke something open inside me, because I knew exactly what he meant. Not the specifics, not the details, but the feeling. I feel lost, he admitted. Lost. That word hit me harder than anything else, because I felt it too. We were both standing at a threshold. He was trying to figure out who he was becoming, and I was trying to figure out who I was allowed to become now that he didn't need me in the same way. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't about anything inappropriate. It was about identity. For 22 years he had been my son. For 22 years, I had been his mom. But who were we outside of that? That question sat between us like something fragile and heavy. Then the doorbell rang. Sharp. Sudden. Almost jarring. It pulled us both back into reality. When I opened the door, our neighbor Mark stood there. Kind. Steady. The type of person who fixes things without being asked twice. He'd come to check if our heating was working properly. Winter had been growing colder, and he knew our system was old. His voice was casual. Normal. But when I glanced back toward the hallway, I saw Lenny watching us. Not angry. Not upset. Just observant. And in that moment, I realized something. Mark wasn't just a neighbor standing at my door. He represented the outside world. New conversations. New connections. Possibilities beyond being just Lenny's mom. And I think Lenny felt that shift too. Not in a jealous way. Not in a possessive way. But in a way that signaled change. The world was moving. And neither of us knew how to move with it. After Mark left, the house felt different. Like something invisible had been acknowledged. Later that night, Lenny knocked on my bedroom door again. He sat beside me, hands clasped tightly. I feel like I'm supposed to have everything figured out by now, he said. But I don't. I saw the pressure on him. The weight of expectations. The fear of making wrong choices. The anxiety of stepping into adulthood without a clear map. And in that moment, I realized something many parents don't want to admit. Sometimes love can hold too tightly. Not out of control. Not out of harm. But out of fear. Fear of being left behind. I hadn't trapped him. But maybe I hadn't fully let him grow beyond me either. And he felt that. Because when someone becomes your entire world, letting them build a world of their own feels like losing something essential. But love isn't meant to cage. It's meant to strengthen. Maybe we both need space to grow, I told him gently. He looked at me, eyes shining, not with sadness, but with understanding. He nodded. Not because we were separating, but because we were redefining. Less dependence. More trust. That's harder than people think. The house was quiet that night. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't tension. It wasn't confusion. It was understanding. Lenny would still be my son. I would still be his mother. But our relationship was shifting into something new. Support instead of control. Trust instead of constant protection. Encouragement instead of fear-based holding on. The next weeks weren't dramatic. There were no big fights. No grand declarations. Just small changes. He started making decisions without asking me first. I started saying, I trust you. Instead of offering solutions immediately. He went out more. Met new people. Talked about plans that didn't revolve around me. And each time, I felt two emotions at once. Pride. And grief. Pride that he was becoming strong. Grief that a chapter of our closeness was quietly closing. But I began to understand something powerful. Love doesn't disappear when it changes shape. It deepens. With more space in the house, I started noticing myself again. The books I used to love. The music I hadn't played in years. The hobbies I abandoned when diapers and school schedules took over. For so long, I had postponed myself. Now there was room to ask uncomfortable questions. What do I want? What makes me feel alive? Who am I outside of motherhood? Those questions scared me, because they meant stepping into unfamiliar territory. But they also meant growth. Mark would occasionally stop by to check the heating, or chat about neighborhood things. Conversations that once felt trivial now felt meaningful. Not because of him specifically, but because they reminded me that I existed in a world beyond my role as mom. And Lenny noticed. Not with resentment, but with awareness. One evening he said, "You seem lighter lately." That surprised me. Go he. Yeah, he smiled. Like you're not carrying everything alone anymore. Maybe he was right. Maybe letting go of fear makes space for freedom. One night, months after that first quiet shift, Lenny came home again, tired but different. Confident. Grounded. He sat at the kitchen table and started telling me about something he was building for his future. Plans. Goals. Mistakes he'd made and lessons he'd learned. He wasn't asking me to fix anything. He was sharing. And that's when it hit me. This was the new version of us. Not child and protector. Not dependence and control. But two adults who love each other deeply. Two people walking side by side. Not because one can't walk alone, but because they choose to. And that changed everything. If you're a parent listening to this, I want you to know something. The moment your child steps into their independence will feel bittersweet. You will feel proud. You will feel scared. You might even feel a quiet loneliness you don't expect. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And if you're the child, the one growing up and feeling lost, understand this. Your confusion is not failure. It's transition. The space between who you were and who you're becoming is uncomfortable. But it's necessary. That night, when Lenny said he felt lost, I realized something profound. We were both lost. And that wasn't a crisis. It was a beginning. Love isn't about holding on so tightly that nothing changes. It's about trusting that even when everything changes, the bond remains. Lenny will always be my son. But he's also becoming his own person. And I am finally allowing myself to become more than just his mother. Not instead of, but in addition to. That quiet evening didn't break us. It reshaped us. And sometimes, that's what growth looks like. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever stood at the edge of change and felt both fear and hope at the same time, know that you're not alone. Some chapters don't end with noise. They end with understanding. And sometimes that's enough.